Yeah, in my opinion, I think the DSS objectives, they sound good on paper, but the reality speaks for itself, that they are taking Native children from families, from Native families. Their objectives are, say, reunite, but if you go by the law, it favors taking them off the reservation or away from their family.
They're well-intentioned people who see these tribal members being raised in a materialistic, impoverished area and want to take them out of that and give them all the things that they won't have back home. But one of the things that they lose then is their own sense of identity. And they can come in and say, well, we'll keep them aware of their tribal culture. We'll take them to a powwow once a year. And that doesn't cut it. We were real aggressive in bringing back children. Now, we brought a lot of them back, and I quit working pretty much as a lawyer some time ago, but it does not seem that the same spirit of cooperation that existed when the Indian Child Welfare Act first came into place is continuing.
There's such an issue with cultural differences, and a lot of times there's probably some conscious bias, but I think a lot of times with the social workers there was some unconscious bias going on. A really good example would be a child was in foster care. The biological mother, now these are Native, the biological mother and the grandmother come to visit that child. And while the biological grandmother and mother were there, they were talking in Lakota. And as they were talking, the social worker was becoming offended. Now, for that particular family, that was their first language. And I was brought in by one of my supervisors and said, you know, they were consulting with me, and they said, what do you think should have been done? I said, well, I guess if the social worker really wanted to know what they were saying, she needs to learn how to speak Lakota. I mean, it was that simple. But for them, that was not the point that they wanted to hear. They weren't willing to sacrifice one language for the other. Their language was much more important.
I worked for DSS for probably about maybe a year and a half, up to that time where I started feeling uncomfortable. It was a good job. I liked trying to help the families, the kids. I liked trying to do the work for DSS. But at the same time, there was situations happening where I started putting myself in those parents' shoes. And that's when I guess I felt that it wasn't fair to the parents. Well, why try to go through all these hoops and get your own place and have this job when there's no jobs to begin with? We're 87.5%, and the poverty rate. We're living in one of the poorest counties in the nation, which is Ziba County, and Dewey, I believe, is third. So there's extenuating circumstances, and that's not fair to, like I said, to the parent.
In tribal court, we would get frequent parent-child interactions because we ran a juvenile court system. So we would have parents who had problems, and they often were economic. They didn't have, for example, cars to get to the clinic, and they didn't have a transportation system all the time. And if there were serious health issues, then social services would go check on the family home, and if they found that there were deficiencies in heating system or whatever, then they would bring that in as a basis for a neglect finding.
I remember a story from a family on one of our reservations who didn't have electricity. But when they were going through the process of trying to become foster parents, went out and bought a microwave oven to have it in the house, because they knew from white middle class standards, in order to be a good home, you had to have a microwave in it. So the families were there, and the families were really trying, but there were lots of barriers to get them through the process.
The idea of taking apart a family unit, to me personally, is not right. So every effort should be made to keep the family together, regardless. That should come first. I can say that with certainty that there are cases where that parent did everything they could do, but still just could not regain custody of their child.
I'm not sure how much the child welfare system's improved. We're so absorbed in the white middle-class culture, we fail to teach anything about their culture. You know, this is really kind of a throwback to boarding schools when you think about it.
Yeah.
It's very similar to what the dynamics that were going on with the boarding schools. Remove the kid from the family and literally kind of brainwashed him.
I remember one instance where we were taking the children without the parents knowing, and I felt very uncomfortable because we basically snuck the kids out the back door, and the parent knew, so she came and she was very upset, and her auntie was with them, and it got into that situation where I felt very uncomfortable for the simple fact that we were not letting the parent know where we were taking them or when. And but I see, working for the state, you think that's the best option. I got a call about maybe midnight at home out in the country, and it was his auntie. She said, "They're taking baby, you better get up here. If you don't, they're gonna keep him," and all this other crazy stuff. When I talked to the case manager, she said, "Well, just wait till tomorrow." So he was taken at a very young age, probably about maybe a month old, or maybe even less than that, I believe, maybe 2 weeks to 3 weeks. So that was very hard for me to stomach that situation. And I thought that I was losing custody of, or I wouldn't say custody. I thought I was losing my son like that. So to be told and looked at and viewed as this is not your child the whole time you're visiting, and then finally when it comes to the head where you get physical custody back of your child, that child's yours no matter what. I mean, that child is your child given by Creator, and somebody else is trying to take that child from you because they think that they have the rights for whatever reason. I don't think that's right. And I know it's not right. So like I talked about the cohesiveness of the family, when you break that, who knows what happens. So it was very, I got a taste of my own medicine. I didn't like it.